On the distant planet of Zithra, sunlight shimmered across crystal towers that reached toward the sky like frozen waterfalls. Floating cities drifted above glowing forests, and rivers of liquid light wound through valleys, giving the world an almost magical glow. Despite the beauty, the royal palace in the capital city Luminara was a place of tension and whispers. Among the rulers and nobles walked a young princess named Lyria, who was different in a way that many in the palace did not understand. Lyria was mute. She had never spoken a word in her life. Some claimed it was a weakness. Others said it was a curse. The nobles often whispered behind her back, calling her the Silent One, and some even laughed openly at her during royal ceremonies. Yet Lyria's silence was not emptiness. She listened. She observed. She noticed the small things others overlooked, the subtle shifts in someone's expression, the tiny tremor of a hand that betrayed fear, the way the wind moved differently. In the crystal gardens before a storm, her mother, Queen Erilyn, ruled with wisdom and patience. She loved Lyria deeply and encouraged her daughter to learn in ways that suited her abilities. While other children of her age were taught speech and rhetoric, Lyria was taught the history of Zithra, the science of its energy systems, and the arts of observation and strategy. Queen Erilyn believed that leadership was not only about speaking, but also about understanding, and Lyria had a mind sharper than anyone realized. Still, calm life in the palace was not easy. The nobles, led by Lord Tivran, a proud and ambitious man, sought to prove that Lyria's silence made her unfit for any real power. A ruler must speak, he would say, loud enough for the entire council to hear. How can a mute child guide our people? How can she command respect when she cannot even speak? Others would nod, murmuring agreement, while Lyria stood silently, her green eyes calm but observant. In the quiet of her private chambers, Lyria often wandered among her books and devices. Her shelves were stacked with ancient texts about Zithra's forgotten inventions and lost technologies. Some described ways to harness energy from the glowing rivers. Others detailed strategies to protect cities from natural disasters. Lyria absorbed it all, her fingers tracing diagrams as she imagined solutions to problems no one yet knew existed. Outside her chambers, the palace buzzed with news. Humans had arrived on Zithra. Their ships were sleek and bright, hovering over the crystal forests with engines that made soft hums like singing metal. The humans were scientists and explorers, seeking knowledge, trade, and friendship. Lyria had seen them from afar, curious about the strangers who communicated in ways she could not. Their voices were loud, clear, and full of emotion. She wondered what it would be like to speak as they did, to have words carry her thoughts across. One day, a human delegation arrived at the palace. Captain Elias Ward, tall and confident, led the group. He had a kind face with eyes that seemed to notice everything. When he first met Lyria, he did not laugh or look down at her silence. Instead, he knelt slightly, smiling, and gestured toward her. At first, Lyria watched cautiously, unsure if he was mocking her like the others. But Elias only pointed to his own mouth, then to her, and made a gesture of writing in the air. Curious, Lyria moved closer. She picked up a small crystal tablet and began to draw symbols. Elias smiled when he understood, nodding in encouragement. Slowly, a language of gestures, drawings, and expressions formed between them. Lyria could communicate her ideas without a single spoken word, and Elias listened as if her silence were a song. He asked questions and she answered with drawings or precise gestures. Through these interactions, Lyria began to see that her silence could be an advantage. Humans and aliens often spoke without truly listening, but she, who did not speak, must observe and understand fully before acting. This gave her insights that others missed. She noticed patterns in behavior, weaknesses in plans, and signs of danger in the palace that even Queen Erilyn did not see. Meanwhile, the nobles continued their schemes. Lord Tivran had discovered that Zithra's energy core, the glowing heart, that powered cities and floating towers, could be exploited for personal gain. He and his followers planned to redirect some of the energy to their own estates, risking instability in the process. Lyria watched their secret meetings from a distance, unseen but attentive. She realized that she might be the only one able to prevent disaster. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. During a council meeting, Lord Tivran proposed a plan to harness more energy from the core than Zithra could safely provide. The chamber erupted in debate. Some nobles cheered, thinking of wealth and power. Others hesitated, sensing danger but unsure of the consequences. Lyria remained seated, silent. Yet her eyes burned with determination. She could not speak, but she could act. Using subtle gestures, she pointed to diagrams she had drawn earlier, showing the real consequences of the plan. Some council members saw and understood, others ignored her. Lord Tivran laughed, turning to the others. Even the silent princess has no wisdom. Her drawings are childish fantasies. But Lyria did not flinch. She had prepared. In her chambers, she had built a small device using the principles of ancient Zithran technology. It could project energy readings across the council chamber, showing the dangerous surges that would result from Tivran's plan. When she activated it, the room filled with glowing patterns of red and orange, highlighting the core's instability. Even the most skeptical nobles gasped. Queen Erilyn stood and nodded. Lyria sees what others do not, she said firmly. Her silence is not weakness. It is careful thought and foresight. The chamber fell silent. Even Lord Tivran, face pale with surprise, could not deny the truth in the projections. Despite this small victory, Lyria knew the challenge was far from over. The nobles would continue to test her, and the humans had only just arrived. She sensed that Zithra's fate might one day depend not on words, but on wisdom, courage, and insight. That night, Lyria wandered the palace gardens, her fingers brushing against glowing flowers that changed color with the wind. The crystal towers reflected the moonlight, casting shimmering patterns across the paths. She paused at the edge of a fountain, watching the liquid light ripple and shimmer. In the reflection, she saw not a mute princess, but a young leader in waiting, a mind sharp, a heart strong, and a spirit unbroken. She remembered the human she had seen earlier, and a small smile crossed her face. Perhaps they could teach her more than words. Perhaps together they could face challenges the palace could not. And perhaps in time, she would find a way to speak. Not because she had to, but because her voice would be heard across the galaxy. Now Lyria remained silent, but she was far from powerless. In her heart, she knew that one day, the world would see that even a mute princess could change the course of history. The night deepened, and the crystal towers glittered like stars fallen to Zithra. Lyria looked toward the horizon, where the human ships floated among the clouds, and she felt a flicker of hope. The journey ahead would be long and full of trials, but she was ready. Silence, she realized, was not a barrier. It was a shield, a teacher, and perhaps one day a bridge to something greater. And so, in the quiet of her palace, the mute princess of Zithra began to prepare, not just to survive mockery, but to achieve a miracle that no one could yet imagine. The morning sun glimmered across Zithra's crystal towers, casting rainbow-like patterns onto the streets below. In the royal palace of Luminara, Princess Lyria walked through the grand halls with careful steps. Today, the palace was busier than usual. News of human scientists' arrival had spread quickly. Their ships, sleek and silver, hovered outside the palace gates, drawing curious citizens from across the floating cities. Among the humans, one stood out. Captain Elias Ward, a man whose presence carried calm authority. Unlike many visitors, he did not look at Lyria with pity or amusement. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in her world and her mind. Lyria had observed him from afar for several days, noting how he spoke with respect to her mother, interacted with her guards politely, and even knelt to examine the crystal floor tiles, fascinated by their structure. Today, Elias approached Lyria. She stood quietly in her private garden, watching glowing flowers bend under the soft morning wind. Elias lifted a small device from his satchel, a simple tablet that could record symbols, drawings, and gestures, and pointed at her. Then he smiled and wrote a small symbol in the air with his finger. Lyria tilted her head, curious but cautious. She took a crystal stylus and began to draw on a small slate she always carried. She sketched a tree, its branches twisting like the towers above, and beneath it a simple pattern representing the flow of Zithra's energy rivers. Elias watched closely, nodding when he understood. "You see the energy patterns differently than we do," he said, speaking slowly so she could follow. Lyria simply nodded. It was her way of acknowledging understanding. Over the next several days, a quiet friendship began to form. Lyria taught Elias about Zithra's energy systems, the floating cities, and the hidden dangers of the energy core. In turn, Elias introduced Lyria to human technology and ideas, showing her devices that could project images and record complex data. Lyria's mind, already sharp, absorbed every lesson with precision. Her hands moved deftly over crystals, wires, and schematics, solving puzzles that had baffled others for years. One evening, while the sun painted the skies with shades of violet and gold, Lyria and Elias sat near a fountain in the palace gardens. The water rippled with soft, glowing waves, and Lyria traced the patterns with her fingers. "The energy flows," she wrote on her tablet, "are not stable in certain zones. Someone is interfering with them." Elias frowned. "Interfering? Who?" Lyria pointed toward the council chambers. She had observed Lord Tyvrin and a few other nobles meeting in secret, their gestures and whispers betraying plans she could not fully hear. Using careful sketches and gestures, she explained that the nobles were plotting to redirect energy from the planet's core to their own estates, risking the stability of the floating cities. Elias's eyes widened. That could destroy the city. The energy rivers are delicate. Even a small change could cause collapse. Lyria nodded. She could not speak, but her mind was filled with ideas for stopping the danger. She and Elias spent hours mapping the energy flows, analyzing weak points and designing strategies to prevent catastrophe. Despite her silence, Lyria's confidence and intelligence impressed Elias. He began to understand that her lack of speech did not mean lack of power. On the contrary, her silence allowed her to see clearly what others could not. Meanwhile, Lord Tyvrin and the nobles continued their secret work. They were convinced that Lyria's silence made her ineffective, blind to the consequences of their actions. "The princess is useless," Tyvrin said one evening, speaking to his followers. "She cannot command, she cannot speak, and she cannot stop us. The throne will never belong to someone who cannot lead with words." Little did they know Lyria had already noticed the pattern of their scheming. She had memorized the layout of the energy conduits, the timing of the core surges, and even the hidden passages that led to restricted chambers. Her observations gave her a silent power that no one, not even the humans, had yet fully realized. One night, as the floating cities glimmered like stars beneath the dark sky, Lyria decided to take action. She used the crystal network in her private chambers to monitor the energy flow and trace the interference. Her hands moved with careful precision, adjusting nodes, rerouting minor energy streams, and stabilizing critical areas without alerting the nobles. The results were immediate. Small surges that could have caused accidents or panic were corrected, and the floating towers remained steady. Elias, watching from his station nearby, could not hide his amazement. "You're incredible," he said softly, recording the readings. "Most would need weeks, but you solved it in hours. Even if you spoke, I doubt anyone else could match your insight." Lyria smiled faintly, not needing words to convey her satisfaction. Yet, not all moments were calm. One day, during a public audience with the palace council, Lyria was summoned. The nobles wanted to test her intelligence and influence in front of human observers. They presented a complex problem about city energy distribution, expecting her to fail or stumble. Lyria listened, her mind moving quickly as she traced patterns on her tablet. When it was her turn, she gestured, drew, and projected images of the energy flow. The solution she presented was elegant, showing not only how to stabilize the system but also how to improve efficiency for the entire city. The council members were shocked. Even Lord Tyvrin's smug expression faltered. The humans, including Elias, watched in silent admiration. Interesting, Elias murmured. She doesn't just solve problems, she anticipates them. That evening, in the quiet of her garden, Lyria reflected on the events of the day. She had begun to see that communication was more than speaking. Observation, thought, and action could convey a message even stronger than words. And yet, there was a part of her that longed to speak, to let her ideas fly freely as humans did. Elias approached her as she watched the floating cities. You know, he said gently, I've seen leaders who speak constantly, giving orders without thought. And I've seen you quiet, listening, understanding, acting. You are already a leader in ways the world doesn't yet understand. Lyria's eyes met his, gratitude shining in them. She could not answer with words, but her hand touched his in thanks. Their bond grew stronger over the following days. Lyria began sharing even deeper secrets of Zythera, hidden archives, ancient devices, and old manuscripts that hinted at technologies long forgotten. Elias, in turn, taught her how humans collaborated, shared knowledge, and solved problems collectively. Through their exchange, Lyria began to imagine a future where humans and Zytherans could work together to protect the planet and improve life for all citizens. But the shadow of danger lingered. Lord Tyverin and his followers were growing impatient. They had noticed that the energy flows were mysteriously stabilizing despite their interference. Suspicion was spreading, and soon they would realize that the Silent Princess was more capable than they imagined. The palace, once filled with laughter at her expense, now hummed with tension. As unseen powers began to move, Lyria sensed the moment approaching when action would no longer be optional. She studied the ancient texts Elias had helped her translate, searching for ways to prevent the nobles from causing disaster. She practiced small experiments, using crystal nodes and energy conduits, learning how to influence flows without touching the core directly. Each experiment strengthened her confidence. Each success reminded her that silence could be a weapon, a shield, and a tool for leadership. One night, as the moons rose over Zythera, casting silver light across the crystal forests, Lyria stood atop a balcony overlooking the floating city. The air was cool, filled with the scent of glowing flowers and distant rain. In the distance, human ships floated gently among the clouds, their engines humming softly. She raised her hand, pointing toward the horizon, imagining the future she wanted, a Zythera where intelligence, courage, and wisdom mattered more than words or appearances. Elias, standing nearby, placed a hand on her shoulder. We will face whatever comes, he said quietly. Together. Lyria's eyes shone with determination. No words were needed. She was ready. The path ahead was dangerous, filled with nobles who underestimated her, and a world that did not yet understand her strength. But she had allies, knowledge, and a mind capable of miracles. The Silent Princess of Zythera had begun her journey, not only to survive mockery and doubt, but to show the galaxy that true leadership was measured by courage, wisdom, and heart, not by the sound of one's voice. And in the quiet of that night, as the city glowed beneath her, Lyria made a silent promise. One day, she would rise not just in the minds of her people, but in the hearts of all who witnessed her courage. The Palace of Luminara was alive with tension. The crystal halls, which usually shimmered with light and music, now echoed with whispers of schemes and warnings. Lord Tyverin had grown impatient. Despite his confidence, the mysterious stabilization of Zythera's energy rivers puzzled him. Every attempt to redirect the planet's core power had failed, and he began to suspect that the Silent Princess, Lyria, had more influence than anyone realized. Lyria, meanwhile, continued her quiet vigilance. From her chambers, she watched the nobles' meetings through the subtle reflections of crystal walls and the faint shimmer of the palace floors. Each gesture, each subtle expression of anger or fear, told her what they were planning. Though she could not speak, she could anticipate their moves. Observation had become her greatest weapon. One morning, Lord Tyverin called for a public challenge, a test designed to humiliate Lyria in front of the council and the human visitors. A true leader must speak and act under pressure, he declared, boldly. Let the silent princess prove her worth if she can. He presented a complex energy problem, a sudden surge in the northern floating districts, caused by the nobles' experiments with the core. The council gathered. Human observers included, their faces a mixture of curiosity and expectation. Lyria stepped forward, her calm eyes scanning the patterns of energy flowing across the city maps displayed before her. The nobles expected hesitation, a pause of indecision. Instead, Lyria's fingers moved swiftly across her tablet, sketching the surging paths, highlighting weak points and proposing solutions through carefully designed gestures. The human scientists, including Captain Elias Ward, watched in silent awe. Elias whispered to his colleague, "She doesn't just understand the system, she predicts it. Every move they make, she already knows the outcome." Lyria's sketches illustrated exactly how to reroute the surges, preventing damage to the districts while stabilizing the entire network. Lord Tyvern's face darkened. "A child's trick," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He turned to his followers, muttering orders to implement his original plan, hoping to override Lyria's solution. But Lyria had anticipated this as well. Using small hidden energy nodes she had installed days before, she subtly adjusted the flow, ensuring that the nobles' actions could not cause the disruption they desired. Slowly, the surges diminished, the maps showing stable energy levels. Across the city. The council was stunned. Even the skeptical nobles could not deny the result. Lyria had acted without a single spoken word, yet her intelligence and foresight had prevented what could have been disaster. The humans, impressed by her skill, began to see the silent princess not as a curiosity but as a brilliant mind. Yet the victory was small and temporary. Lord Tyvern was not a man to accept defeat. In secret, he began to plan a more dangerous scheme, one that could put the entire planet at risk. He gathered allies among the nobles, convincing them that Lyria's silence and cleverness were threats to their power. They plotted to take direct control of the energy core, bypassing the council and even the queen. If successful, they would hold Zithra hostage to their ambitions. Lyria, aware of their intentions, began preparing countermeasures. She spent hours studying the palace archives, ancient texts, and human technology Elias had shared. She mapped every conduit, every control station, and every hidden passage. Using her unique understanding of energy patterns, she designed subtle adjustments to the flow that would neutralize any sudden interference. She worked quietly, carefully, knowing that any visible preparation might alert the nobles. During these days, her bond with Elias deepened. He became more than an observer. He was a partner. Together, they experimented with devices that could project energy patterns in real time, allowing Lyria to test her strategies before implementing them. Elias often marveled at how naturally Lyria thought through problems, how her silence forced her to focus entirely on observation, prediction, and calculation. But not all attention was friendly. Rumors of Lyria's cleverness spread through the palace, reaching the ears of some humans who were unaccustomed to such quiet brilliance. Some visitors doubted her, assuming that her silence indicated inexperience. Lyria paid them no mind. She had learned long ago that words could be deceiving. Action and result spoke louder than any speech. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the crystal forests, Lyria spotted a troubling pattern in the energy flow. The nobles had begun secretly rerouting power from the core in ways she had not anticipated. If unchecked, the surges could destabilize an entire floating district, causing massive damage and panic. She called Elias to her side, pointing to the fluctuating readings. Elias's brow furrowed. "This is serious. They could collapse the northern districts within hours. We need a plan." Lyria nodded, sketching a series of precise adjustments and gesturing at the nodes she had previously installed. Together, they devised a solution that would counter the surges while leaving the nobles unaware of the intervention. As night fell, Lyria moved through the palace corridors with quiet determination. She adjusted the hidden nodes, realigned energy conduits, and ensured that the flow remained stable. The nobles, unaware that their plan had been countered, continued their manipulations, believing their actions were working. By morning, the districts remained intact, and the council and citizens were none the wiser. The next day, Lord Tivrin grew suspicious. He demanded an audience with Lyria, hoping to confront her directly. When she entered the council chamber, she remained calm. Tivrin tried to challenge her, asking questions that he believed would expose her weaknesses. Lyria responded with gestures and projected diagrams, each answer precise, each action measured. The council watched in awe as she solved complex problems in real time, neutralizing the nobles' manipulations without causing alarm. Even human observers were amazed. Elias whispered to another scientist, "She's doing what most leaders couldn't do in weeks, and she hasn't said a word." Frustrated and humiliated, Tivrin stormed from the chamber, muttering threats. Lyria remained composed, her mind already planning for the next challenge. She knew the nobles would escalate their schemes, but she was ready. Silence had become her strength, and her ability to act without words made her unpredictable. Even to her enemies. The palace, however, was not free from tension. Some citizens began to question the competence of the nobles who had opposed Lyria. Whispers of admiration for the silent princess began to circulate. Even minor acts of kindness and intelligence by Lyria were noticed. The way she had rerouted energy flows to prevent accidents, the subtle adjustments she made to improve life in the floating districts, and the careful planning that ensured citizens' safety. At night, Lyria reflected on the day's events. The humans' arrival had changed many things. Elias had shown her that collaboration could amplify her abilities. Her silence, once a source of ridicule, was now a shield and a tool. Yet she knew that the greatest challenge had yet to come. The nobles would not stop, and the energy core's instability was a danger that grew daily. She stood on the balcony, watching the glowing towers and floating gardens. The twin moons cast silver light across the crystal city, and she traced the patterns of energy with her fingers, imagining the flow of power and the steps needed to control it. Every decision mattered. Every action could prevent catastrophe. Elias joined her quietly. "You've done more than anyone expected," he said. "Most would give up under this pressure, but you continue. Your silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Lyria's eyes met his, and she smiled faintly. No words were needed. He understood. In the days that followed, Lyria continued to prepare. She studied ancient devices, experimented with energy nodes, and refined her strategies. Every moment was an opportunity to learn, to anticipate, to act. She knew that the nobles' next move would be bolder, perhaps even dangerous. But she also knew she was ready. Her silent strength was beginning to inspire others. Some palace servants, once hesitant or fearful, began to support her quietly. The humans, fascinated by her methods, offered advice, tools, and insight. And Lyria, though still mute, found that her influence extended far beyond words. Her actions, intelligence, and courage spoke louder than any speech ever could. As the twin moons set and the first light of dawn touched the floating cities, Lyria stood ready. She had survived mockery, outsmarted ambitious nobles, and shown that leadership was measured not by words, but by wisdom, foresight, and action. The coming days would test her even more, but the silent princess of Zythera had proven that she was more than capable. She was a force that could not be ignored. And somewhere in the shadows, the nobles began to realize that the silent princess was not merely a child to be mocked. She was a leader in waiting, a mind capable of miracles, and a presence that would soon change the fate of Zythera forever. The sky over Zythera had darkened with an unusual glow. The floating cities trembled gently as the energy core beneath the planet pulsed violently. In the palace of Luminara, alarms rang softly but insistently, echoing through crystal halls. Princess Lyria stood in her private chambers, her eyes scanning the glowing projections of the energy flows. Her heart beat quickly, not with fear, but with focus. The noble's latest plan had gone too far. Lord Tivrin had managed to bypass some of the safeguards Lyria had put in place. He had redirected a significant portion of the core's energy toward his own estates, causing dangerous surges across the northern floating districts. If not stopped immediately, entire sections of the city could collapse. Lyria turned to Elias, who stood beside her, his face tense. "We must act now," he said. "There's no time for trial and error." Lyria nodded. She had already traced the flow of energy in her mind, identifying weak points, critical nodes, and the exact sequence of adjustments needed. Every moment counted. She moved swiftly through the palace corridors, reaching the central control chamber. The humans followed, amazed at how quietly she moved, yet how efficiently she directed the operations. Lyria had designed a system of ancient nodes and modern devices that could stabilize the energy core, but only if activated precisely. Any misstep could be catastrophic. As she began to adjust the nodes, a sudden surge knocked her off balance. Crystals on the walls vibrated, and a warning light flashed red. Lyria's mind raced. She could not speak to command the technicians quickly enough. The humans tried to assist, but the pace was too fast. The surges were spreading, threatening. The entire northern sector. Frustration and fear surged within her, emotions she rarely allowed herself to feel. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. Lyria reached out to an ancient device she had discovered in the royal archives, a device rumored to channel thought into sound. Her hands hovered over the controls, and with complete focus, she activated it. A soft hum filled the chamber. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a clear, powerful voice rang out. Lyria's voice, audible and strong, echoing across the palace. "Stop the surges, redirect power to the northern conduits, stabilize the nodes." For a moment, everyone froze. The humans, the technicians, even the guards were stunned. The voice was unmistakably hers, yet no one had ever heard her speak before. Then, as if her words carried authority beyond sound, the machines responded. Lights blinked in sequence, energy flows adjusted, and the surges began to fade. Captain Elias Ward's eyes widened. She can speak," he exclaimed. "And she's controlling the core with her voice." Lyria did not pause. Her mind was focused entirely on the task. She issued clear instructions, combining gestures, voice commands, and mental focus through the ancient device. Each command synchronized the energy nodes, neutralizing the surges. The northern floating districts, once on the brink of collapse, began to stabilize. Crystals no longer vibrated violently, and the glowing rivers of energy calmed. In the council chamber, Lord Tivrin watched in disbelief. His smug confidence crumbled as he realized that the silent princess he had mocked had not only prevented disaster but had done so in a way he could not understand or control. His followers whispered in confusion, unsure of what to do. The humans, including Elias, followed Lyria's voice with awe, marveling at her intelligence and command. As the last surge faded, the palace fell silent. Then a wave of applause and astonished murmurs spread through the chamber. Lyria stood tall, her green eyes bright with determination. She had spoken, truly spoken, for the first time in her life, and her words had changed the course of events. Elias approached her cautiously, still amazed. "Lyria, that was incredible. You saved the city. You saved lives. I don't know what to say." Lyria smiled softly. "We did it," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Together. The energy flows are stable, but we must remain vigilant. Lord Tivrin will not stop his plans." Her words carried not only command but a promise. She was ready to lead, to act, and to protect her people. The citizens of Zythera began to gather outside the palace, sensing the shift in power. Word spread quickly that the mute princess had spoken for the first time, and that her voice had prevented disaster. Some were in awe, others in disbelief, but all began to see Lyria in a new light. She was no longer a child to be mocked. She was a leader. Queen Arelyn entered the chamber, her face shining with pride. "Lyria," she said, her voice warm, "you have done what many could not. You have shown wisdom, courage, and strength. Your voice is a gift, but your actions, your mind, are your true power." Lyria nodded, feeling the weight of her responsibilities more than ever. Speaking had amplified her influence, but it was her insight, preparation, and courage that had truly saved the city. She realized that her silence had taught her patience and observation, while her voice had now given her the power to direct others with clarity. In the days that followed, Lyria continued to monitor the energy core and the floating districts. She spoke to technicians, humans, and even the palace guards, coordinating their efforts with calm authority. The humans marveled at her abilities, noting how seamlessly she combined her ancient knowledge with modern technology. Elias often worked alongside her, offering guidance and learning from her strategies. Together they became a formidable team. Lord Tivran, however, was not defeated. Humiliated but unyielding, he began to plot anew, realizing that brute force alone would not succeed against Lyria. The princess, aware of his schemes, prepared countermeasures in advance. She reinforced energy nodes, devised protective protocols, and trained human and Zitharan allies in emergency procedures. Each step she took strengthened her leadership and ensured that the planet would remain safe. The miracle of Lyria's speech spread beyond the palace walls. Citizens began to see her as more than a princess. They saw her as a protector, a mind capable of extraordinary solutions, and a voice that could guide them through peril. The humans documented her achievements, noting how intelligence, courage, and heart had combined to avert disaster. Lyria's story began to travel across the galaxy, a tale of resilience and brilliance. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the crystal forests, Lyria and Elias walked through the palace gardens. The air was cool, filled with the scent of glowing flowers and the soft hum of stabilized energy. Elias smiled. "You know, Lyria, your voice, it's remarkable. But what impresses me most is how you used your silence to see what others could not. That's what truly saved Zithara." Lyria nodded, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Silence teaches patience," she said, "and patience teaches understanding. My voice is new, but my mind has always been ready." The human scientist shook his head in admiration. "You've shown us all that leadership is not just about words. It's about insight, courage, and the willingness to act. Zithara is lucky to have you." For the first time, Lyria allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had accomplished. She had spoken, yes, but she had also acted, observed, and led. The city was safe, her people inspired, and the humans impressed. Yet she knew the challenges remained. Lord Tivran and his allies would continue to plot, and the energy core remained a powerful force that required constant vigilance. Still in that moment, Lyria allowed herself a quiet smile. She had crossed a threshold, from silence to speech, from mockery to recognition, from observation to action. Her voice had become a tool, her mind a weapon, and her courage a shield. She had proven that even those underestimated or ignored could rise to greatness. As the night deepened and the crystal towers reflected the twin moons, Lyria stood atop the balcony, gazing over Zithara. The floating cities shimmered in peaceful glow and the energy rivers flowed steadily. She raised her hand slightly, imagining the future she would help shape, a future of cooperation, wisdom, and courage. And somewhere deep in the palace, Lord Tivran realized that the silent princess he had mocked was no longer silent, no longer powerless, and no longer a child to be dismissed. She was a leader, a protector, and a mind capable of miracles. For Lyria, the miracle was not only in the sound of her voice, it was in the strength she had always carried, the courage she had always shown, and the wisdom she had quietly honed. And, as she stood there, watching her world shine with renewed stability, Lyria knew that the greatest challenges were yet to come, and that she would face them with voice, mind, and heart united. The crystal towers of Luminara glimmered in the soft morning light, reflecting the calm rivers of energy that now flowed steadily across Zithara. The city, once tense with uncertainty and fear, hummed with life. Citizens walked through the floating districts, smiling and speaking freely, unaware of the disaster that had nearly struck, or perhaps aware, but filled with newfound respect for the young princess who had saved them. Princess Lyria stood in the palace balcony, her green eyes scanning the horizon. The twin moons had faded, leaving only the bright sunlight reflecting off crystal towers. She felt a quiet satisfaction, but not pride. Her thoughts were already on what lay ahead. Leadership, she realized, was not a single act of heroism. It was continuous vigilance, careful planning, and inspiring others to act together. Captain Elias Ward approached her, carrying a tablet filled with reports and observations from the humans. "The citizens are asking about you," he said. "They want to know the princess who saved Zythera with her voice and her mind." Lyria smiled faintly. "They will know soon enough," she replied. Her voice, now steady and clear, carried calm authority. "For now, they must see that action matters more than words. Leadership is measured in deeds, not just speech." Word of Lyria's heroism had spread quickly. Humans and Zytherans alike spoke of the miracle, the moment she had spoken and controlled the energy flows to prevent catastrophe. Scholars studied her methods. Young leaders visited the palace to learn from her strategies. Even some nobles, once dismissive and hostile, now watched her carefully, realizing that underestimating the silent princess had been a grave mistake. Lord Tivran, still bitter but wiser, approached Lyria one afternoon. The Grand Council had called a meeting to discuss the future of the energy core and the stability of the floating cities. Tivran, though humbled, attempted to assert himself. "Princess," he said, his voice measured, "your actions were surprising. I suppose your solutions worked because of luck or timing." Lyria looked at him calmly. "No, Lord Tivran," she said. "Luck does not stabilize a planet. Knowledge, preparation, and courage do. The future of Zythera is not a game of chance. It belongs to all who act wisely." Her words carried weight, and for the first time, Tivran did not respond with arrogance. He nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement that her mind and leadership were unmatched. With Tivran's grudging respect, the council began to change. Lyria suggested reforms that ensured every voice in the council, silent or spoken, was valued. Decisions were no longer dictated by pride or ambition, but guided by evidence, wisdom, and cooperation. Citizens began to feel their leaders were fairer, and even small disputes in the floating cities were solved through discussion rather than conflict. Humans played an important role as well. Elias and his team worked with Zytheran engineers to develop new methods of energy monitoring and protection. Lyria guided them, combining ancient Zytheran knowledge with human technology. The results were remarkable. The floating cities became more stable, energy systems more efficient, and potential disasters easier to prevent. Lyria's leadership had not only saved lives, but had also created a foundation for a better, safer Zythera. Beyond the palace walls, Lyria's story began to inspire the galaxy. Messages of her courage, intelligence, and eventual speech reached distant worlds. She became a symbol that even those underestimated, mocked, or ignored could rise to greatness. Young aliens, humans, and citizens of other planets wrote letters, sent messages, and visited Zythera to learn from her example. They admired not just her voice, but her mind and heart. In the palace gardens, Lyria often walked with Elias, observing the citizens, listening to their concerns, and planning future improvements. The glowing flowers, the shimmering energy rivers, and the floating cities were no longer threats to her. They were reminders of what careful thought and courage could achieve. She taught young nobles and human students alike about observation, strategy, and the importance of combining knowledge with compassion. One day, a small child approached Lyria in the garden. The child had seen her during the crisis and looked up at her with wide eyes. "Princess," the child asked, "will I ever be as brave as you?" Lyria knelt to meet the child's gaze. "Bravery is not loud," she said gently. "It is quiet, steady, and willing to act when it matters. You have it in you already. You only need to listen, think, and do what is right." The child smiled and ran off, inspired. Lyria watched the young figure disappear among the crystal towers and floating gardens. Moments like these, she realized, were the true measure of leadership. It was not just saving cities or controlling energy. It was inspiring others to be their best selves. Even as the palace settled into this new era of stability, Lyria remained vigilant. She knew that challenges would continue. Lord Tivran might try again, natural disasters could strike, and the energy core was always a powerful force to respect. Yet she faced these realities with confidence. She had discovered the power of her voice, yes, but she also understood that her greatest strength had always been her mind, her courage, and her determination. The humans began to integrate more fully with Zithran society. Together with Lyria's guidance, they helped develop technologies to protect the floating cities, improve communication across the planet, and monitor the energy core in real time. The partnership between humans and Zitharans became a model for interstellar cooperation, a testament to what could be achieved when different minds worked together for a common good. One evening, as the twin moons rose and reflected off the crystal towers, Lyria stood on the balcony, gazing at the glowing rivers below. She thought of the days when nobles mocked her, when silence had seemed a burden, and when she had feared that she might never be heard. And now, she had not only spoken but had led her people, inspired allies, and ensured the safety of an entire planet. Elias joined her silently. "You've changed everything," he said softly. "Not just for Zythera, but for everyone who hears your story. You've shown that even those who are underestimated can achieve miracles." Lyria smiled, her voice calm and steady. "A miracle is not sudden," she said. "It comes from preparation, courage, and heart. Anyone can be a miracle if they choose to act wisely and bravely." As the months passed, Lyria's influence grew. She guided the council, advised citizens, and worked with humans to explore new technologies. The floating cities flourished. Energy systems became models of efficiency. Citizens, young and old, looked to her not only as a princess but as a symbol of hope, wisdom, and strength. Lord Tivran, though still ambitious, learned to respect her authority. He realized that Zythera's future depended not on personal gain, but on unity and careful leadership. Even he began to contribute, offering knowledge and resources that previously would have been used for selfish purposes. Lyria's story spread further, reaching planets across the galaxy. Scholars wrote of her courage, scientists studied her methods, and young leaders drew inspiration from her example. She became known as the princess who had turned mockery into miracle, who had spoken for the first time to save her world, and whose mind and heart had always been her true strength. Years later, as she walked through the palace gardens with Elias and young leaders of Zythera, Lyria reflected on her journey. She had once been silent, mocked, and underestimated. Now, she was heard, respected, and admired. Yet she knew that her voice alone had not created this change. It had been her actions, her patience, her observation, and her courage that had made the difference. She stopped at the edge of a fountain, watching the glowing water ripple under the twin moons. Young students gathered around, asking questions about energy, leadership, and courage. Lyria answered using her voice, gestures, and thoughtful guidance. She encouraged them to observe carefully, think deeply, and act bravely. In their eyes, she saw the next generation of leaders, ready to build a future even brighter than hers. The palace, the city, and the floating gardens all thrived under her guidance. Humans and Zytherans worked together, sharing knowledge, exploring new possibilities, and protecting the planet. Lyria's legacy was not just in saving the city or speaking for the first time. It was in creating a society where wisdom, courage, and compassion were valued above arrogance and pride. And as she looked out over Zythera, the once mute princess knew that her journey had transformed not only her life, but the lives of all who called this planet home. She had turned mockery into miracle, silence into action, and courage into inspiration. Her voice, her mind, and her heart had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that even the most underestimated could achieve greatness, and that true leadership comes from understanding, acting, and inspiring others. The twin moons reflected off the crystal towers one last time, shining on a world that was safe, vibrant, and united. And at the center of it all stood Princess Lyria, silent no longer, but powerful in every way that truly mattered.